And watch it go.
We are live.
We are live.
La, la, la.
So much exciting. As those of you who are joining us this evening trickle in, we will just give it a couple minutes so we can get everyone seated in their virtual seat.
Buckle up.
Yes. Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. We are absolutely delighted to be kicking off our Books in Common Northwest literary speaking events for 2021 this year with Jamie Harrison and Jamie Ford. It's particularly special for those of us here in Montana because they are both Montana authors. But we are absolutely delighted. We here at Country Bookshelf have just been waiting with bated breath for the Center of Everything to come out and for us to be able to put it into your hands. So it's delightful for all of you to have joined us this evening. We are also grateful to be sharing this virtual space with our fellow Books in Common stores, Paulina Springs Books in Sisters, Oregon, and Madison Books in Seattle, Washington. Do follow us at booksincommonnw.com or follow us on Eventbrite to see what other great events we've got coming in for this year. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel to see what we did last year. Before we get to Jamie and Jamie, not to make that confusing, we wanted to point out just a couple of things about this virtual space. If you didn't add a copy of the Center of Everything to your registration, you can visit booksincommonnw.com and click on the logo of your favorite sponsoring store to get a copy of that. We are recording the event live, and it will be viewable at a later date on the Books in Common NW YouTube channel. So after the event concludes, that's also when those of you who have purchased books, those will head out to you once we've gotten our full class roster for the evening. If you have questions for Jamie or Jamie, do submit them by clicking on the Q&A button, which is usually at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a mobile device, sometimes it's up at the top, but look for that Q&A bubble, and you can drop your questions there and we'll get to them as time allows. You can also try, if you can't find the Q&A bubble, drop them in the chat. I'll be watching for them there as well. And once we have enjoyed some interesting conversation with the Jamies, I'll pop back on and help out with those questions. I do want to remind everyone that this is a shared creative space that we want to remain safe for everyone. So inappropriate or rude comments will see the user dismissed, and comments, of course, deleted. But without further ado, Jamie Harrison has lived in Montana with her family for more than 30 years and has worked as a caterer, a gardener, an editor, and is the author of The Center of Everything, as well as The Widow Nash and the 4 Jules Clement Blue Deer mysteries, The Edge of the Crazies, Going Local, An Unfortunate Prairie Occurrence, and Blue Deer Thaw. She was awarded the Mountains and Plains Independent Bookseller Association Reading the West Award for The Widow Nash and was a finalist for the High Plains Book Award. The son of a Chinese American father, Jamie Ford is the New York Times best-selling author of The Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, which won the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, and Songs of Willow Frost. His most recent novel is Love and Other Consolation Prizes. Ford is an award-winning short story writer, an alumnus of the Squaw Valley Community of Writers, and a survivor of the Orson Scott Card Literary Boot Camp. Having grown up in Seattle, he now lives in Montana with his wife and children. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to you guys. Don't forget to leave those questions and enjoy.
I love it.
Jamie.
Wow, we already have one question. We will, and it's from Cheryl McKeon. Hello, Cheryl. We will get to the questions a little bit later, but keep them coming because questions are super important. just a sidebar moment. When I've done a bunch of these, and I know you've done a bunch of these, and they always have the sort of the caveat of, if there's someone that just decides to show up and just spam us with a bunch of weirdness, they will be shown the door. That's never happened to me yet. I've heard about it.
Wow.
I almost want someone to do it so I can see what that's like. Yeah, no, knock on wood. It always seems so civil. Like, what weirdos at home thinking, you know what, I'm going to interrupt like authors talking about books. That's how I'm going to make my mark on the world. And I'm going to spam them with whatever. So anyway, sorry.
It is a year for unprecedented things.
Yeah.
Things
it
just
is
happen.
true.
I don't know. Yeah.
I used to do these on Google Plus when that was a platform. And a couple times we left it open, and we did have people show up, but it was just friends hanging out. It wasn't an actual event. And that was a little strange, but anyway, if there's some strange person out there that wants to come in and talk to us about books, bring it.
We will answer it. Yes.
Yeah. But let's talk about your book. What did you tell us about? Give us, the elevator pitch is always hard for me. Like, as I'm writing it.
Oh, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah,
okay.
You run into someone at the grocery store and they're like, oh, what's your next book about? And when you haven't finished it, you're just like, okay, hold on. But where you are now, the book is out in the world. You've given birth to this new child, and surely you have.
I can do something. Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm never good at pitching, but yeah, it's about a woman named Paulie who has a brain injury, has had a brain injury. It's 2002, and she is having trouble recovering from it. At the same time that she's got a group of her family has arrived in town. Some of them are trying to take care of her. Some of them are trying to sort of push her through this and make her survive it. And she, at the same time, has lost a friend in the river. So the book cuts between Paulie trying to learn how to run a restaurant again or just live her life again, and this search for this friend. And Paulie begins to have trouble differentiating between her past and her current life. And she begins to question the nature of her memories due to the relatives who are around, who either believe her, don't believe her, throw new things in, make her question everything that she thought she knew.
I've read the book. I love the book. It's hard to put down. But I know you as an author. You're in Livingston. I'm wearing my Livingston t-shirt.
Great.
For those of you out there, we're like 30 minutes away, but we haven't been able to get together because of COVID. So this is super cool that we can just kind of hang out. Yeah. A question that I sometimes think about with authors, including myself, is why this book at this point, not in your career, but just as a person? Because I think, the Beatles, their first album had a certain voice, and then they did a bunch of drugs, and their later albums had a different voice. And every book, for me, it's almost like an encapsulation of where you are as a human, right, and the things you're processing. And I know, talk about the personal touchstones that are connected to this book, but why this book now? Like, where?
I think I had been thinking of parts of it for years. Part of it is set in 1968. Paulie's a child. She's 8 years old, and she has a good friend. She's living with her great-grandparents. The story about these children in this strange world of Long Island, with things sort of running amok around them, is something I tried writing about 20 years ago in a screenplay with my father, which was essentially a ghost story, and almost but did not get made. And I put it away. I wrote a short story about a woman in the mid-'80s cooking in New York. That made it into this too. I wrote another short story about a drowning on the river. And, somehow I began to just sort of mash them together. and I've had a head injury. So I think I really wrote it out of that. The struggle to the fear that you were going to lose whatever memory you had. I do not want to have Alzheimer's. You know, I feel fine now. I'm really lucky. I've known a couple of other people who've had brain injuries and they haven't been lucky, but it was just terrifying because especially if you're a writer, all you've got is your ability to use language, right? And it rocked me. But I started sort of taking notes on it, on how, you know, confused I was, on how this I was, how that I was. And eventually they began to seem almost funny. They weren't funny, but I was trying to sort of distance it. And so I just started writing about this woman named Polly. And she's not me, but I did leave a lot of hoses on. I left a lot of burners on. I did a lot of things like that. And it was just a great way to sort of exercise it. And then I just started telling the story and it started smashing the other things. And I don't really know why. I also, in the midst of writing it, at the beginning of writing it, lost my parents 6 months apart. So I think I was thinking a lot about how you keep your people with you. You know, how you handle grief. You don't do it by just putting it away necessarily. You try to keep them around and you think back. So
I didn't know that about your mom and dad. I lost both my parents in the same year, so we'll have to get together and have a
drink.
Talk about how when you get to write 2 obituaries in 1 year and how that shapes you.
Yeah, it was brutal.
For people that aren't familiar with your head injury and your recovery and that whole journey, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Not really. I mean, I was fine. I went without oxygen for a few minutes after a very common procedure, but they had to do chest compressions and the whole thing. So aside from that, it's not like you remember it. So there's no real trauma that way. It was just an odd thing, completely whatever. They gave me too much medication. But yeah, I was really, I couldn't think straight. And, but it was great writing through it. I had a brother-in-law who had a head injury. And so I guess that was my fear. And he really did not get back. But it didn't get in the way of writing. It did mean I had more stickum pads everywhere with lists and things like that, because I just felt vague. But I wrote through it. And, I'm not Polly, but I have always loved turning things into fiction. I like making things up. I never want to write an autobiography, but I love using that stray thought. If you really do fall off a picnic bench, use it. Why not? And I'm fine now, more or less.
That's good. My oldest brother, had an aneurysm years ago, and he was in a coma for a month and a half. And then when he came out, he was not the same person. Like, he recovered, but his personality was completely different. Which was wild. So
that's what happened with my brother-in-law. I am, for better or worse, the same person. But I don't know why also, another thing that was sort of behind this book is a true argument I had with my own mother. I had a memory of being little. A tragedy happened to my family. My father's father and his sister were killed in a car accident when I was very young. And my mother and father and I subsequently, this is in the early 60s, I was really young, I was 3, moved east. Left this sort of larger family, my dad's family. There were lots of brothers and sisters. People were really close. It was just an awful thing. We moved in with them right after this accident. And then we left. We just took off. And I remember thinking, why would we possibly be leaving these people? And I decided that it was to find that I could figure out what was wrong. I could find my grandfather and my aunt. I'd find them. And if somebody else, people had forgotten. I don't know if it was sort of like when you'd watch Peter Pan, like maybe they were lost boys, maybe they were this. I had this whole theory and thought I could find them.
Wow.
And the argument with my mother was about, was I making this up in my 40s, or did I really remember doing it? And I do remember being on a train, and I remember looking in Boston and then forgetting about the whole thing. But But so you
I
got to
love that.
use your life.
You do. I mean, it's writers, it's the thing about cutting your finger and bleeding on the page. Like, there's so many authors, once, I know their work, and that once I get to know them personally, I start to see the connective tissue, and people that know me and know my books can see it. Um, and it seems like for most authors, you can't help it. It's almost like therapeutic. It comes out. Which brings me to authors like Bret Easton Ellis, who write American Psycho. Where does that come from? People are always like, write what you know. And I'm like, that's about cutting people up with chainsaws. I'm not sure where that comes from. But
I don't know. I don't know. But I have had
cocaine.
fun
Just those
too, though.
drugs.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that period in my life, and I never cut anybody up with a chainsaw. I don't know. I love writing about things I don't know. I mean, Widow Nash, I put that woman through every country I couldn't visit, right?
Mm, yeah.
So I hate the idea that I could only write about the small space that we inhabit, which currently is very cold, windy, and nasty. I mean, let's write about Southern Italy, Jamie. Right?
Take me to Tuscany.
Yeah.
I
Right.
want to
I
write about
know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
My next book, I have to do research in Fiji for some reason.
Right. Right.
The book is, it's very much about, and I relate to it in a way because as a child, you sort of look at your parents and you see them one way and you see the family dynamics, and then you grow up and you become, you get married or have a partner and you have children, and your parents go away, and you learn that they're like things that people don't talk about when people are alive. And it seems like every family just has, you can call them family secrets or just things that they just ignore, whether that's, the one uncle that's in a prison and no one ever talks about, or it's the child that was given away. And I'm sure everyone, all the people that are here, they can relate to that. And it's almost this shedding of innocence. Suddenly when you realize that your parents weren't perfect, or they were more complicated, or they had tragic flaws. What was that like for you growing up in a very unique, charismatic, artistic family that moved around a bit?
I had a really good childhood. I mean, it was chaotic in a lot of ways, but it was secure in other ways. But I do remember being consistently annoyed by the idea that the parents, my friends' parents, didn't think we knew what was going on. We always knew what was going on. I mean, we're pretty cognizant of the fact that people were growing dope in the orchard, or, whatever. Somebody was going to get a divorce. We were not going to leave the party at 8:30. We were not going to leave the party till 12:30. I don't remember like really painful revelations about my family, but part of what this story is about, there's a character of Edmund, who's a friend of Polly's, is all my friends who really had rough childhoods, who didn't essentially, my parents might have been, they were very young, it was the 60s, but we always, went home together. We always had dinner. It was somehow really secure. They had no money, but I don't really remember being afraid. And a lot of my friends were collateral damage. And it's not a question, people were young, people behaved badly. We all have friends who didn't make it. And so part of this is maybe sort of saving Edmund. There was no Edmund in my life, but I found myself really enjoying writing about that character and sort of giving him another chance, actually.
Was there a moment in your family? Well, actually, we can talk about all your books, because as authors, we tend to echo some of the complex dynamics of our friends and family. Has there been a book or a character or a scene or a chapter or just a moment that that was an echo of someone that offended them, or maybe it should have offended them and they didn't even recognize it?
Oh, well, my first mystery novel I wrote after I wrote.
You're getting nervous here. I like this.
No, I am.
Everybody
Because
listen.
this is the thing I get in
Take
town.
notes.
Everybody, says, "Who's that? Who's that? Who's that?" When I used to write the mysteries, especially. And my first job in Montana after I moved out here was to edit Clark City Press for Russell Chatham, who was a wonderful, charismatic painter, owned restaurants in town, would have owned the world and run it if he could possibly have. And Clark City did pretty well. We put out maybe 25 books over the course of a few years, and they were beautiful books. Russell designed them, I edited them. Other people worked there, and we all had a wonderful time. And he ran out of money, essentially, and kind of perhaps aimed high with production values, let's say. But at the end of this first iteration, he brought it back years later. He refused to sell it to Grove Press, to sell half of it to keep it going. It was all his and he wanted to keep it. And so we went out of business, and I wrote a mystery and basically killed him. So there's this character named George, and it's not really Russell, but it was enough of like Russell that people gave me a hard time.
And Russell's no longer with us.
No,
so
Russell died last fall.
We can say this.
Yeah, Russell already knew. He knew.
Was he flattered by this, or was he changing the locks on his door?
No, probably not initially, and I don't know if he actually really ever read it. But he, no, we got along. He was good friends with my parents, and I saw him off and on over the years. And he was a lovely man. He's the reason that we got to Montana. He offered us a house for rent on the National Forest line at Deep Creek in Livingston and Paradise Valley, there's nothing prettier. And we got to live there for 2 years until he got divorced again and he needed to move back in. So it was great.
Wow. How has it been, publishing a book in the time of COVID? I don't know when, I'm not done with my book, and it could be out a year and a half, 2 years from now. So hopefully people have taken the vaccine, but it's got to be just a surreal time.
Well, they delayed it. It was supposed to come out in June of last year, and Counterpoint, my wonderful publisher, made the very wise choice to just stop and delay it. And because they were shifting distributors, moving to Random House, they decided to wait till the first of the year so that it would be out early with Random House rather than the end of the, I love the other distributors too, but that's why they postponed it. And it was a relief, because how do you do it? How would you have done it in June? So many good books. There are so many good books, we all know, every year that don't get read to begin with. But this year had to be brutal. Just brutal. I've been buying more and I have a big stack to read just because.
I think sales have been, I keep my eye on the trades, and the sales have been good.
Yeah.
Like people, and maybe because, readers, maybe, I don't know why. You could write a doctoral thesis on maybe readers are introverted and COVID wasn't impacting their lifestyle. They're not, out singing karaoke every night. They're home, going to the like they should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember, do you know Glenn David Gould, if you're familiar with him, the author? His book, Carter Beats the Devil.
I mean, I don't know him, but I know his book. Yeah, it's a wonderful book.
I've only met him once. I don't really know him, but I do know he's a serial killer. No, I'm just kidding. Like saying things publicly about people that I don't know.
Oh dear, here we go. Yeah.
For the record. No, but I do know he had a book called Carter Beats the Devil. It was a big book, had a big push. Tom Cruise optioned it before it was even published. And then it came out the week of 9/11. And obviously the big publisher supported tour vanished. There were no interviews because every news agency was focusing on terrorism and things like that. So yeah, this is sort of that, but drawn out over
Right.
9 months.
Well, I bought Carter Beats the Devil, but I'm an anomaly, and you are
I read
too.
it too.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess some independent stores have done really well this year, and that's good. Um,
Yeah,
People are watching good TV and they're reading good books, and it's pretty
true.
much the highlight of the year, huh?
I do, people are often like, they've written the obituary for the novel for 200 years. I'm sure when the radio became commonplace, people were like, it's the end. And then when television, it's the end. But it is heartening to look at HBO Max or Netflix and Hulu, and
Mhm.
most of that content comes from someplace else. Very often books and graphic novels and things like that. So so it is heartening. I don't know if there's a point there. It's just kind of a comment that every
The
time I
point
look.
is that we should all sell our screen rights immediately. That's the point, Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Have you had that experience?
Years ago.
You've written
Oh,
screenplays and edited, or like worked with screenplays with people too. You've seen it from the inside out.
it's ugly.
Really?
No, I don't know. And that was years ago. That was years and years ago. I worked for Michael Douglas's production company, and I remember
Michael Douglas, the talk show, or Michael Douglas, the actor?
the actor. This
Okay.
is a long time ago. Remember, I'm older than you, Jamie.
Just a fraction.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I was working for Michael Douglas in the mid 80s in New York, and he was doing Wall Street. And one of the properties, one thing that came through was Phil Caputo's Horn of Africa, which still hasn't been made, which is a wonderful book. But the other thing, John Huston wrote a script for my father's book, Revenge. And that came in, and I crawled holding, the manuscript saying, please do this. But he didn't. And it's all heartbreak. But I did enjoy, I wrote a lot of versions of the mysteries over the years. And I did a lot of treatments. It's fun in terms of, it's great for dialogue. It's great for pacing. It's great getting to tell a story. You just had to make your peace with the idea that it will disappear. Nobody will ever read it, I wrote a romantic comedy about birders that still should be made. But, what a silly thing to do. Why did I do that? But I enjoyed it. Have you done that? Have you just written some original screenplays? You want to not admit it?
Oh no, I haven't written any originals. The people the producers at Optioned Hotel, they let me write the abhorrent, horrible, embarrassing first draft of a screenplay for that. And that was when I realized this is a very specific skill set. And that's why really good screenwriters, are worth their weight in gold. And now that they have assigned a screenwriter to it, and I worked with her a little bit, just hanging out with her and traveling around Seattle a bit, and her story instincts are so different from mine, but they're brilliant. I think she's phenomenal. So I don't know. We'll see. It's something that I'm curious about. Like Josh Mallerman, who wrote Bird Box, which probably everybody has seen the movie on Netflix. But he wrote that. I think he wrote that as a screenplay first. Don't hate me, Josh, if I'm butchering this. He had a manager in Hollywood, so he had written like a dozen screenplays and was in that world before he gave up and decided to write a novel. Actually, no, that one did not come from a screenplay. The screenplay came later. But yeah, it's a different. If it's an adjacent world, and they cross, and I'm so scared to go there.
I guess I found it was sort of a nice break. It was getting to tell a story. It was just using a different part of my brain. I liked doing it.
I did like writing it because I described it as writing a screenplay as like the designing a house, but you don't have to do the drywall or the electric or the plumbing or do the roof.
But you do. That's the thing.
You do. But in a novel, you do everything yourself, and there's no one that's going to bring anything else to the party from a vision point, from like a director or something like that. And so it was freeing, but it was also, I just don't think I don't think I'm cut out for it. So
yeah, but you don't have to, because you've got a good 2-book deal and you're going to write the great American novel. It's almost done. No
if there's
pressure.
a country left.
Well, that, yeah, right.
Using my book to at campfires
Yeah.
in the apocalyptic wasteland that our country is slipping into. Anyway, boy, back to you. Let's talk more about this book specifically. Was there... I wrote a children's story, and I held, it was just a short story in an anthology, but I really held back on some stuff that I wanted to put in there, and I deeply regret it. Have you ever been in that situation with some of your books where you're like, I want to do this, but this is, it's gonna offend the reader, scare people away, offend family, my publisher won't like it? I mean, have you fought those battles?
Yeah, I have.
Externally?
Yeah, I have. I'm sure that, I suppose as a writer you should push through it, but I have been careful. Absolutely. I'm not proud of it, but I have, which is why we write fiction. It's somebody else, right? That's the thing. But yeah, I've been really careful about it, with the exception of killing Russell. Poor Russell. But, yeah, I avoid it. And I love, I really do particularly like fiction because you can distance yourself. I mean, one thing is, you can say almost everything is autobiographical. It's not entirely right what you know. You can put yourself in a different century. You can put yourself in a different sex. When I wrote the mysteries, this was years ago when I first wrote them. It was 20 years ago, maybe longer. But I was trying to think of how to write about a cop. I am a very liberal person. I'm a very left-wing person, and I wanted to write mysteries, and I needed a protagonist. And every time I tried to think about sort of an amateur sort of dabbling with this and that, it just felt cheesy. I didn't think I could pull it off. And so I came up with an ex-archaeologist who's a cop, and I had to make him likable and like me. And this is nothing against good police officers, but it's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing. But I had a lot of fun with him. He was a young character. He was this, he was that. And nobody seemed to figure out that he was really me in town. It was great. I could go out and people would say, how did you make that stuff up? Or how did you, who is that? And it's like,
they're not closing the doors.
It's me getting to have a bar fight, right? It's me having, affairs. It's me doing whatever. It's just, you just think yourself into your character's brain and let them go.
I love that.
So disguise.
Let's take a couple questions here. This is from Cheryl McKeon, and Cheryl asks, or she says, your story moves so seamlessly among the decades. Did you have this flow determined from the beginning of your writing? And she said your spectacular novel. It was in parentheses, so I thought it might be a spoiler, but I had to. She's just praising you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. No, it wasn't seamless. I did try to kind of emulate Paulie's brain and her confusion and have some sort of looping sense of time. But if it's seamless, that's a lot of hard work on my part, and it's a lot of great advice from my agent, who is a really good editor, and from my editor, Dan Smetanka, who at some point told me I had to cut a big chunk of it because it was going to stand out. It was just going to fall apart. It was something in the middle of the two time periods. And he thought I was laughing, and I was laughing, but I was also sort of weeping. I was lying on the floor, I don't want to cut it. I didn't want to do it. But he was right. I still say, and I'm saying now, if he's watching, you're right, Dan. So the seamless part of it took a lot of work. And it's, I think for me, because I don't write novels in order, I have never managed to just sit down and write something from the beginning to the end let alone not throwing in any other time periods. It's coming, so much of it is the pattern that you put the information in. So much of what is effective about the story is when you tell it, how you tell it.
Yeah. Yeah, the phrase that I never forgot was order of exposition, which is just sort of story flow of how the story unfolds. With the book I'm finishing now, it's the first time that I actually have written a bunch of things out of order, and I had never done that before. And I thought it would be total madness, but it was great. It was very freeing, because if I couldn't solve a problem here, I could jump over here and still maintain my energy, and then be jogging down the street and suddenly solve that other problem and go back to it. So there was some real utility to it.
Your writing is probably better. I mean, if I think of something, I write it then. And then at the end, or as I am now with this book, there's just the mass that I have to put together again and then sort of rewrite over, because it has to flow.
Right.
Yeah.
I like it. This is from Beth Boyson, and hello, Beth. And her question is, I enjoy the redemption, resilience of the characters in both of the author's books. Is that something that evolves naturally over the course of composition, or do you need that to happen in fiction?
Redemption?
Yeah.
I don't know if it always happens, and I'm trying to think. I bet in some cases I have characters who aren't. The guy who takes Ariel down the river in this novel is not redeemed. I don't know. I don't think life.
That part of the book was fantastic, by the way. I mean, you have multiple mysteries going on at the same time, but that one was very captivating.
Well, it's the pacing. I needed something to pace this backstory, right? You can't just tell a backstory.
Right.
You need something to pull you along and to pull the character along to think it through. And I really struggled with that. I had a hard time, aside from just spending a lot of time on a kayak thinking of logistics. So, which was fun. But
do you have a kayak?
My son does. He's used to loaning it to me.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I wish I did.
I have one. We'll have to get out on the river. I haven't floated anywhere down here. I've only been up on the Missouri, north of us, but this is like Disneyland down here for people in the
Yeah, it is. No, we should do that. We could actually do that even if the world is still
absolutely
shit this summer. Right. Sorry, dogs.
I love dogs. It's actually kind of rare that we're having this conversation. Usually when I do these Zooms, I'm just like, please let the FedEx man not go to the front door, because then my dogs just go hysterical.
Yeah, I know. I was braced for it. It's okay.
Yeah, and everyone gets to hear them. So
yeah.
This question is from Cynthia, and hello, Cynthia. And the question is, can you each discuss the editing process you go through with your editors as you finalize your novels? Have you had a difference of opinions with your editors as to your vision of the novel you're writing?
Well, I just told the story about weeping on the floor while Dan thought I was laughing.
Was that your editor? I thought that was your agent.
No, it was my editor.
Oh.
No, yeah. I'd gone through it with my agent, and then I hit the brutal truth with Dan, who's very, one thing, it's good to cut. It is always better to make things shorter. And I was trying to stuff too much into the story in that case, and I just couldn't quite part with it, because I wanted to explain something about the characters. I wanted to explain essentially the backstory of the older couple who we see in 1968, how they had met each other, how they'd fallen in love with each other. I really wanted to tell that, and it was one of the first chapters I'd written, but I cut it. And I know the line "kill your darlings" is overused, but I wrote a couple of drafts at least. I wrote 3 drafts probably. I submitted one to get an agent, because my old agent, I no longer had him. That was Widow Nash. But it's a lot of work. I don't know. And you have to be open-minded. I really believe in editors. Part of that is because I used to edit. Another part is because doing screenplays makes you better at editing, I think, or makes you, it beats down your arrogance a little bit. It makes you think, okay, wait.
Smaller.
Yeah, or just let's stand back here. Let's put it down. Let's not get angry. And let's look at it again. And usually, unfortunately, they're right if it's a good editor. So
I've had my experience with editors have been mixed in for me it was just chemistry. My last editor, I had an editor for my first two books, and then she in the merger between Penguin and Random House, she was voted off the island. And I waited. I was going to follow her to wherever she ended up, and I waited many months. And then she just didn't find the right fit for her either, so she became an agent. And we're still friends. And if I'm in New York, we always get together. But I describe her as my fairy godmother, because she understood me. She made things appear that I needed at that time. And then the editor that followed, she was a brilliant editor. I don't think we were the right personalities. And we were discussing earlier, I described her as I'm just more sentimental and maudlin, and I cry at sad movies and books and Burger King commercials and things like that.
yeah,
And she's less,
it wasn't a good fit.
We didn't have the emotional vocabulary to work together.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there was something. You must know Amy Hundley, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Amy's great.
Amy's wonderful. And she was out here one time. And Amy's an editor.
She was my father's editor.
Father's editor.
Yeah.
But she talked about editing books set in the West, and how often New York, they have to fight for things that are less New York centric. And I ran into this with my editor, where I have all these streets and the names of ferries and schools and things like that in the Northwest and mountains. And she just crossed all of them out. Just say,
your editor or
yeah.
Amy?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
My last editor, she felt all of those things that were identifying of a place were unimportant. See,
that's no good. You have great specificity. I love reading about Seattle. I mean, that's a huge part of your books. And writing about place is a big part of my books too. It's like making the world real, and why would you possibly do that? So off with her head.
It bothered me. That was the only time we actually had kind of a heated discussion. Was she really, there was I mentioned a hospital, and it was the largest mental hospital west of the Mississippi, and she just didn't think I should name it. And it's this iconic place. And she I can't remember what she said, but it was places in New York, like the Chelsea Hotel, are important. Places in Seattle are not.
Well,
that was not what I
don't think that's prevalent. I think gradually, at least, people are increasingly aware that people live in other parts of the country. It's something that my dad used to just rant about. It's the old New Yorker cartoon about the two coasts and then the great blob-like center. And
the place is a silent character to me, and it needs its own voice.
It explains a lot of things. I mean, weather really can mean something, and it can mean something in all sorts of novels. We can think of, some of the greatest novels ever have to do with place, and they have to do with weather. There's all sorts of, I'm trying to think, might have been George Saunders who had some wonderful bit about it. And some part of my winter has been listening to podcasts and playing solitaire when I'm absolutely losing my mind. And I've been listening to all these great writers and thinking, oh my God. But yeah, I love your Seattle. You need your Seattle. I hope we don't bore people, but
it's important. It's if they want to we want to get to know you. This is part of you.
Yeah. Yep.
I brought up Amy because she lives in New York, but she definitely recognizes how important it is to represent the character of the West.
Right.
And that she had to fight those battles sometimes because people
She
fought
is a Chicago girl.
Okay.
And she
Chicago.
edited Malcolm Brooks. Yeah, she's
Nice.
No,
She's
Amy's great.
super
I
cool.
actually saw Amy Hunley. Everybody, she's an editor at Grove Atlantic, and she's very pretty, very city dressing, great. But I once saw her. My parents had shot a rattlesnake, and Amy really wanted the
As
rattle.
one does.
And this is a long story, but anyway, the end of it was that Amy held this pitchfork down on the dead, but still probably could have bitten her rattlesnake while I cut off the tail. She put her little pedicured foot down on the snake to hold it down while I cut it off, and then took the rattle home. So
I love it.
Yeah.
It's her initiation to Montana right there.
Yes, she didn't even begin to turn her. Anyway.
Another question. This is from Kathy. Hey, Kathy. Was the title your idea? And if yes, was it always the title, or were there others? Naming your babies is always a good question.
Well, it's a dirty secret, but no, it was not. It was Dan Smetanka's idea, and I didn't have a good title idea. I thought of it as the Paulie book. I would have named it just Paulie, and that wasn't going to get us anywhere. And I liked it, and I'd used the phrase, and so Dan went with it, and it works. I've since gotten like a couple of reviews saying the center is mothers, or the center is death, or the center is this, and I don't, it's mothers, really. Yeah. It's mothers.
Ironically, probably 6 months before I read your book, I read another book called The Book of Paulie. That was the name.
Oh, did you?
Yes. And it's written by Kathy Heppenstall, and her mother is named Paulie, and the character is very much her mother, and so she just went there. So
hey,
yeah. So I think your title's brilliant, and if it was Paulie, it might be confused with this other.
It would. You're right, Dan. See, once again, Dan is right.
You nailed it.
Go with your editor.
Another question, and this is from an anonymous attendee. You write about food and somehow integrate it into the narrative. Can you describe how you think about food and writing together? This is interesting, especially there are authors like Pat Conroy that have a cookbook. Your father. There's a lot of people. So I'm interested in your answer here for sure.
Won't have anything to do with having watched Hannibal last summer. Let's see. Writing about food. So how much I spend a lot of every day cooking, actually.
You're a great cook. You showed up at New Cross, which was a writing residency with your own Bolognese sauce. So
again, I wanted to be safe while I was there. I should admit to everybody, showed up with like a case of wine just in case we didn't have any in Wyoming. But I think of it as sort of a pacing of life. It's part of what, especially, it's part of the way I remember, say, my grandparents. A lot of life is food. A lot of ritual is food. My family weren't churchgoers. We cooked. And it's a big part of remembering people. It's part of your past. It's part of your emotional past. And it is just part of your day. It's part of Polly's logistics, given that she can't remember to turn off a flame due to her mild brain injury. It's just things keep screwing up. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant, as I have and you have, it's comedic too. Things go wrong. It's Murphy's Law in action.
I love that you just described food as it relates to remembering people. I didn't realize that, but that's really what I do. I cook things that my dad made, or it's weird. The men in my family always did most of the cooking, so it was my dad and my grandpa and I. But even like tonight, I'm drinking a White Russian, which is what my mom always drank.
There you go.
And I never drank them until like 3 months ago, when I just thought, oh, I'm thinking about my mom today, and went to the liquor store and got Kahlua. So,
Mom, I know. I miss you. Yeah.
And my mom was an alcoholic, so there's a lot of there's a lot of therapy involved in being able to drink this thing right here.
You're not, and it's a pandemic, so I
True.
think we all dabble in our past. Everybody in my family cooks. Some of them well, some of them not well. My father was maybe not the world's best cook, but he was certainly enthusiastic. My mother was a very good cook. One grandmother just cooked horribly, just these iron sort of roasts, but these were sort of like the things I remember from childhood. Everybody going, oh God, this is horrible, or oh, this is wonderful, or now we're going to go shopping again. So
there are more questions. This is from Christina McPhee, who we know is an amazing fine artist, visual artist extraordinaire. And Christina's question is, I've been listening to The Center of Everything and it sucks. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding, Christina. Putting words in Christina's mouth. I've been listening to The Center of Everything today on Audible. Initially, after an hour or so, I've been impressed by a sense of the early 2000s. I think this is very difficult to do because it's just close enough to be our own time, but hard to characterize. Jamie Harrison, can you comment on how you researched that period, including or beyond your own memories of it? I think this is a really interesting question because I do think we have a hard time remembering our near past. We're taught history, and then there's the present, and then there's the space that is always in flux, right, for me.
So why did I do that? I think I did it. I did it in part because we did have a family reunion the weekend of 9/11. And so there was a lot of family. My Aunt Mary and Uncle Nick were there, and they got to stay longer in that contrail-free sky. It was just an odd time. It sort of locked in my head. But mostly I did it logistically because I wanted to have the character of Maud still alive, and I wanted her to be the daughter of a character who I'd worked into it from an earlier novel. So I had a timeline, and I had to be about 2002. And I also really wanted Paulie to be, it's hard enough. Yeah, it's hard to remember the recent past. So I guess I made Paulie roughly my age, but I didn't want her to be as old as I was. I wanted to have it be a younger marriage, younger children, a different world. And I just picked that. It is hard. It was, I had more trouble with that research than I've had setting a whole novel in 1905 in a weird way. I kept getting things wrong. Like, when did this happen? I was trying to remember, when did we start Googling everything, right?
Right. Yeah,
a long time ago.
So. I've wanted to set a book in the 70s, and that's because it's when I was a little kid and grew up, and the more I try to understand it, the less I do, because I had all my memories were from this very naive little innocent grade schooler point of view, and then I look back and it's post.
But then you should just be subjective, and it's what you remember. That's what I tried doing. I wanted to smash everything from the year 1968 in, because there's been no more interesting year, right? Until maybe this year. But I was writing about a little girl in 1968, so it had to be the sort of weird shuttered thing, like, what movie they happened to go to.
Right.
Just little bits. You want to, you're kind of a maximalist. You want to smash it all in too. And sometimes you just gotta say, I can't do that with this point of view.
Right. This question's from Carrie the question is from Carrie is, do you think you'll ever revisit Jules Clement and Blue Deer?
I'm trying really hard, and I'm wading through a manuscript that when we saw each other a year ago, a year ago, I was working on. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting there. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
And they're reissuing the old ones. So.
Nice. This question is from Hannah Novak. Hannah was my flatmate at UCross. Hello, Jamies. Could you talk about your relationship to genre? What was it like to go from writing a mystery novel to perhaps a less codified or looser genre in this novel?
I loved it. And I loved it when I did Widow Nash too. And I sort of stupidly thought that it would be easy and fun to go back to mysteries. And in fact, it's really hard work to write a mystery. And now I just want to write another straight novel, gotta say. But I'll finish the mystery.
I never knew how to get my brain around genre. I just kind of write what I want to write, but then I am aware of specific genres, and then because I'm aware of them, I want to write for all of them just because it seems like it would be interesting. And so whenever someone has an anthology and they're like, do you want to write about, the end of the world, or do you want to write middle grade horror, or do you want to write crime noir? I'm always an automatic yes. I'm actually, I agreed to I don't know the title of it, but it's all erotica, and it's all these literary authors, and I think it's called Anonymous Sex, and everyone.
They didn't ask me. Go on.
You got to go to the right parties.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's all these authors, and everyone is writing erotica, and the table of contents will list the authors and the stories, but no one knows who wrote which stories, and we all have to sign affidavits that we will not reveal what we wrote, so we're all anonymous. And so again, genre is just like, it's like, do you want pizza, do you want tacos?
No, and I think a mystery novel can be as good as any other novel, and in fact the best mysteries novel, I mean, they're tremendously good in every way. They have every kind of resonance, and that's sort of something I wanted to prove with Jules, and I never quite got there, but I really believe it and still want to do it.
Yeah, I think I know it offends people that are very fans of genre, like, science fiction, when a known literary author picks up a science fiction trope and is awarded, praised for writing a pretty cliche concept, but in a literary context. Whether that's, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, where there's been a bazillion books just like that. But because his name's Cormac McCarthy, it gets a different audience that these other.
Well, the writing was pretty good too.
And the writing was pretty good. Yeah, that's true. But I have a weird relationship.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
Because I don't know, like, who makes that decision, and sometimes it's just the intent of the author. I wrote some graphic novels scripts for an anthology. So I'm writing superheroes, and someone wrote to me and said, aren't you worried about your literary reputation? And I was like, I have a literary reputation. What is that?
I don't think so. Come on.
I just want to write whatever I want to write. So yeah, genre, it feels like people that only listen to country music and they won't listen to hip hop. I want to listen to both. And so
I think it's getting mixed up now. I really think it's getting mixed up. I mean, Roxanne Gay is doing graphic novels. People just are mixing it up, and it's good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's good. It's really good.
That's what I was going to say was Ta-Nehisi Coates and Roxanne Gay both write for Marvel.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So, I have a couple questions from the chat box. Dan Call asks Jamie Harrison, knowing you have written screenplays in the past, if one of your novels were to be made into a movie, would you want to write the screenplay, or would you want nothing to do with that?
I would, but I would want the health insurance, you see. There's a whole hoodle there. Yes. Yeah, I would, but I think a lot of what happens, you want a producer's credit. And so you sign up and you do the first draft, and then they take it to the professionals after that. But yeah, I would like to kind of map it out. And because these novels are linked, I would try to do it from that point of view. Dan. Hi, Dan.
I was going to say, I also wanted to let you know that several of the folks that you have mentioned are actually joining us this evening. So Dan is here and Amy is here, and we have a wonderful audience. This might be our moment for last questions because it looks like we got through all of the Q&A. And thank you to those of you who moved your questions from the chat box to the Q&A so that Jamie could find them faster than I could interject. But if you haven't picked up The Center of Everything, I'm so excited to have a giant stack behind me so that you can all visit Country Bookshelf or Paulina Springs Books in Sisters, Oregon, or Madison Books in Seattle and get your copy because it's the center of everything, you guys. Come on.
Good.
But there's a link in the chat to visit booksincommonnw.com. You just click the logo of your favorite sponsoring store and we can get you more titles. We can get you the Widow Nash. We can get you Jamie Ford's titles. But thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
And support your indie bookstores.
Yes.
Yay, Elliott Bay. We have so many wonderful friends in the independent bookseller community.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It is your support for things like Books in Common, for these indie bookstores that have kept us here through a very trying year. So we are, as booksellers, we are very, very grateful to be able to get to still talk about books with other people. Ooh, final question.
You guys did a wonderful job all year. You really did. You kept that store going. It was wonderful. You guys rock. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Well, more applause are coming in from the chat. So thank you all so much for joining us. We'll hope to see you for our next Books in Common. Stay tuned to the calendar for that. And thank you both, Jamie and Jamie, for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you or your web orders in store. I feel like we've seen both and it's always like, oh, I'm going to draw a little heart on this delivery label. Yay, I know you.
Thanks.
So we are paying attention.
Thanks for having us. And Jamie, I'll see you at a picnic table.
Absolutely.
With a bottle of something soon. Okay.
Absolutely.
And a kayak.
Okay. And a kayak or some combination thereof. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thanks.